Alright, so 28 years later, the Bone Temple is here, and with it being a direct continuation, and I think I was very satisfied for how it turned out, and aside with following up on this re-established world coming from Danny Boyle, but coming in the hands of Nia DaCosta, I thought it was executed perfectly, especially as for what they pack in here towards the final end result, and for what is set up for part 3, aka the finale. Probably gonna wrap up this series, but that's what I'm gonna get to right here. And so, but this will be in full spoiler territory, so if you've not seen it, go ahead and watch the movie, come back to this video afterwards, because we will be going into full spoilers, talk about what happened and going over the ending and that special character appearance and so much more. And so, if you're new, then be sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell so I'm on any future videos. But now, let's head right into it. And now, I just want to say, like right here, that I think for how they pulled off this follow-up, and I think it is a much better sequel than to what we got from the previous entry, because with 28 years later, the Bone Temple, and this is like focusing on these character perspectives. It is a rather much focused story, especially with Dr. Kelson and Spike and what their storylines have to follow up from 28 years later. And now, I want to point out with Kelson's character arc, and I thought it is developed brilliantly, because for what his purpose is, it's to develop a cure, and especially for when he spends time in his bunker coming up with equations and for make a discovery that could change the world forever as we know it. And I think for what Ralph Fiennes really puts into this type of character is unlike anything that I've ever seen, even for when he communicates with the infected, aka Samson, who comes directly in his path, and those two kind of become friends. I'm just assuming for how this doctor really finds his way of just communicating just with anyone in the outbreak, because even in this apocalyptic setting, it is very much rare that we would see a character like him being just in the path of the infected, and aside from being in this world. And even with Spike's intention of being with Sir Jimmy's cult, of now realizing of who he is for why he's been put in this group that he encountered it, but for how we see Spike in a completely different light, and just for how he really puts on a really great character with Sir Jimmy Crystal. And I thought this villainy arc was really pulled off well, and I think I could speak for everyone for what I say. I think Jack O'Connell's award is coming, especially for how to pull off a great villain in this great follow-up sequel, because of the way that we were introduced to him in 28 years later. It was so just dumb, in my opinion, within the ending to that previous movie when they were doing that breakdancing bit. That totally baffled my experience. But for when Sir Jimmy Crystal is introduced on screen, just leading this cult of trying to hunt down the innocent people that are in the apocalyptic outbreak, and trying to execute them. But just with the group alone, for how were they explored here, and I thought it is brilliantly well done for how it all just comes to be for a brilliant great entry. It is really some of the best stuff in the horror-esque world that I've ever seen in terms of apocalyptic thriller movies. And just from how it shapes up with every single storyline, for every single character, for us and for me to be invested into. And I think this is a good way to explore how it really feels just to be in the perspective for when the infected approach human beings, and how someone like Dr. Kelson is able to even communicate just from the infected. And now, as this focuses on Sir Jimmy's plan all along is to get Kelson to impersonate as Satan, or else he threatens to kill him, and it of course leads to Ike to discover Kelson and his Bone Temple, and with him finding the cure. And I think for how Sir Jimmy Crystal is planning on to have Kelson to impersonate as Satan, and because for how this cult looks at Kelson, as he is like the doctor, because of what type of background like he comes from, and how it leads into this apocalyptic reality, is that he can communicate with the infected. Yeah, like I think that's how I find it to be like truly fascinating of the way that they would tackle this type of thing. And when Sir Jimmy's plan is in full action, when Spike attempts to make an escape from the gang, that he is caught by Fox, and even with Ike, who might have turned into a different character perspective, as in order to even save Spike, that she kills Fox in order to be the savior, and that's what leads into Ike bringing Spike back to the gang, and to even have him confronted by Sir Jimmy. And I think for how he definitely feels towards Spike, knowing for what he was getting into with his time with this cult gang, and even just as the cult and now is going into the Bowen Temple, and now to confront to Kelson, it makes it a clear home run in the third act to me. And I think this is the showdown that we were all expecting, especially with Sir Jimmy talking to Kelson. And now, as we roll into the third act for how the storylines really come together, is with Kelson, that really plays a role to impersonate as Satan, and in front of Sir Jimmy cult, and he really puts on a dance number, like a lip sync performance, to even get rid of the gang. And just in a moment, for when Kelson realizes that Spike is with them, and that he probably tells them that he does not belong with them. But unfortunately, with Sir Jimmy, he stabs Kelson, and just as Spike comforts him in his final minutes, he unfortunately dies. With Ike, that kills every single one of the fingers of the cult gang, and even like just as this cult really does like bad things. And I thought it was a perfectly well executed third act moment, and such a thrill experience just to witness this a type of final act to even close the movie. And for how like Ralph Fiennes really puts into a performance, and even to do like a dance number, and just to put on a show, and for how Sir Jimmy is executed, and that he is like on a cross, and then with Spike, that he lives with Ike, whose real name is revealed to be Kelly, and the two walk off. But then with Sir Jimmy's consequence, that he gets eaten alive by the infected, aka his hallucination of Samson, and now being like turned into Satan. Let me just tell you, and I think this is a well pulled off final act, the way just to bring like Sir Jimmy's villain character to a close. And I think it is a definite bravo. They really know how to hit this with a brilliant home run. With the final minutes of the movie that I really want to get into, is that we see a cottage, a farmhouse, just in the middle of Iceland, and we get the special character appearance of the return of none other than Cillian Murphy as Jim. Like, he is back in the role, and now that we see that he has a daughter, and he is clearly homeschooling her, and this really wants to go ahead and to show us what happened after Jim's ending in 28 days later, especially in the final scene of that movie, for when Jim and Selena are on land, like, especially for how they were going to explain this. And even with Cillian Murphy back in this franchise, and to even come back in the final minutes of 28 years later, Bowen Temple, I thought it was so good. And then we see Jim and his daughter look out the window to see like the infected are after Spike and Kelly, and that they are later now going to help them. This is to set up the upcoming sequel. And I think for what my predictions are for how that sets up part 3 so well to even close out this franchise, because it is a total of 5 movies, especially with the 28 years later. That they said it's going to be built on a trilogy of 3 movies. 28 years later, and the next film is part 2, and the next one is part 3, and to even close out the series together, and to even have part 3 to bring back Cillian Murphy's Jim, and that's how you do a series. And I think just bringing him back, it is perfect, and I think it is so good. And now I want to go over how this film's ending really ties back to the earlier movie, 28 Days Later, because with Jim that now has a child, and that Jim and Selena were together by the end of that film, but we don't see Selena anywhere and what happened to her. But we assume that Jim and his daughter are now like living together, sort of like a father and daughter. He really wants to keep his daughter safe. But I do think, how are they going to explain this in the third and final movie as like a third part to even close out the series? And we'll have to wait and see. And honestly, I thought after the ending of this film, and it really changed the game, it really changed everything forever. And now that Dr. Kelson is gone, but with Cillian Murphy's Jim coming back in the picture to move forward with the next sequel, and plus a third 28 years later movie has already been announced that it's in the works, and it's been so, I think, from December of 2025, and bringing back Cillian Murphy in the main role, and having Danny Boyle coming back to direct with Alex Garland. But yeah, there's going to be such more of it, and I can't wait to see for what happens down the line, especially as a 28 years later part 3. I mean, sign me up. And I think for what we're about to see in the next film is with Spike Kelly leading Jim and his daughter to discovering Kelson's bunker and his plans, aka the cure that could save the world from the rage outbreak, and to even end all of this. And I think Cillian Murphy is definitely going to have a bigger role, especially when you reintroduce him back into this world after so many years. I mean, even though 20 years later was a long-awaited sequel, but with Cillian Murphy's return, it was well worth it. And to set up the next movie, I think it's coming out in like a few years. We don't have an exact release date, but I think it is thought out so perfectly of the way that they did it. And so yeah, there you have it. This is my Andy Explained, a spoiler review for 28 years later, The Bone Temple. I generally like this follow-up sequel for how they dug deep into the plot and a story-focused, executed story. And I think we're about to be in for a treat for the third 28 years later movie, and I can't wait to see for how they wrap it up. And yeah, Cillian Murphy is definitely the GOAT too. But that's gonna do it for this video. Just let me know in the comments down below, and what your thoughts on 28 years later, The Bone Temple, and what your thoughts on the ending and Cillian Murphy coming back and setting up the third movie. But just let me know in the comments down below. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to notifications about future videos. And also follow all my social medias, all linked down below. And with that, I'll see you in the next video. Peace.